It will be live streamed on the Council's YouTube channel. Only elected members plus our main guests will appear on the screen, and officers and any other registered speakers will be off screen but will appear when asked to contribute. Now, just to be, all of your microphones are muted when you're not actually speaking. If you wish to speak, can you signal very clearly by raising your hand? Meeting. So let me begin by confirming the names of those in attendance. Next to me, I have Councillor Paul Kohler. Paul, if you could give us a wave, thank you. Coming down on the far right of the screen, Councillor Joan Henry. Away from you, Joan, thank you. Councillor Ed Gretton, next to Joan.
Hi there.
Chief Exec Jed Curran will be speaking to us later. Coming down to the next row, the leader of the council, Councillor Stephen Allen Bretis. Then going across, Councillor Natasha Irons, Councillor Nick McLean, our co-opted member, Mansour Ahmad. Welcome back, Mansour. You were an independent member before, and it's good to have you back again. Under Mansour, there we have Councillor John Dehaney. You're looking very motionless, John. I want to check you're still alive. Okay. Next to John, Councillor Peter McCabe. And next to Peter, Councillor Owen Pritchard. We are at the moment still waiting then for Councillor Sally Kenny, am I correct? And is that it? Good. Okay. So we hope Sally will be joining us very shortly. We've dealt with declarations of pecuniary interest. The minutes of our previous meeting, in a previous lifetime, it feels now, doesn't it? Can I accept those as an agreed record? Councillor Kohler. Paul, yes, you want to comment?
So I was waiting to be unmuted. I'll unmute myself. Hi, yes, it's just page 3. You're left a rather lonely soul there on your motion. I don't think we ever got to asking for a second, so I would have seconded it. Could we change those notes a bit? So, can you hear me?
I can, and my concern is whether we could minute something that didn't actually happen.
Well, we didn't. I'm not asking for that. I'm simply asking that we remove the line "there was no seconder," because we didn't actually ask for a formal second.
No, okay. Yes, I would agree to that, subject to officers being happy with that. Okay. Any other matters arising from the minutes? There being none, let's turn to the substantial item for the evening, which are...
If Councillor Kohler is referring to the motion proposed by Councillor Owen Pritchard and seconded by myself, I did second it. And I'm sure Councillor...
No, the line before that. Read the whole minute.
The line before...
Yeah, it's the second paragraph under reference to cabinet, the first sentence of the second paragraph. Is that okay?
Yeah, agreed.
Okay.
So yes, just to clarify, Nick, your motion was duly well, Councillor Pritchard's motion was duly seconded by you, which is all minuted.
I mean, Just to know, my recollection is that there was a request for a second. Nobody put their hand up for Councillor Kohler's motion. I'm quite surprised he wants to change the minute now to say that there was no second when it was explicitly asked by the chair and none came forward.
There was no second. There was no asking for a seconder.
Yeah, if
I
we spend
argued
the
in
evening
defence of the
debating the
motion, and then
minutes,
it
we're not
became
going to get
obvious.
very
Everyone
far.
else.
Does it actually make a difference, and can we move on?
I think we can move on. Thank you. So our main item this evening is to hear from the leader and the chief executive on how they see our borough now in circumstances that I've never witnessed in a very long lifetime, and hope not to witness again. But these are exceptional times, and I think we'll be interested to hear how they view Merton. Leader, can I ask you to start?
Yes, thank you, Peter. And can I thank you and Peter McCabe and all the members for putting this meeting in place, and a huge thank you to Democratic Services. These virtual meetings are important during this current crisis time. We've had a cabinet meeting that's been virtual, planning has been virtual, and now Overview and Scrutiny Commission is our wont and our a desire that we move to all our meetings, and hopefully we'll have a July full council meeting as a virtual meeting, and officers are working on that. But I do welcome the Overview and Scrutiny Commission
very much.
Working itself through.
Yeah, goodness knows what.
Our first thoughts are with those who have lost their lives, and with the relatives and friends of those who have lost their lives. And as at today, that's 35,704 people this country has lost. In Merton, the figures as at Monday, the 18th of May, just this Monday, of deaths, and very, very sad, 131 from a hospital setting, 21 from a care home setting, and another 21 from another setting. So that takes the total of fatalities, sadly, to 173 here in the London Borough of Merton. I know I'm joined by everyone in paying a tribute to all key workers, be they in hospitals, doctors, nurses, support staff, porters, all care home staff, and let's not forget London Borough of Merton's social workers, care providers and their workers, and a huge thank you to our refuse collectors, to Veolia, for the sterling work they're currently doing in what is a very important task, keeping the borough clean and safe. And a big thank you to our staff. Two examples: our librarians, as our libraries are closed, now working in the voluntary sector, helping the voluntary sector to help people. And our bailiffs, no longer knocking on doors to collect money, but knocking on doors, redeployed, knocking on doors to hand out food parcels. And so big thank you to the staff and for the work that they are doing. And we need to make a big appreciation for our voluntary sector, be that Merton Voluntary Services Council and the hub they're running, be that Don's Local Action Group, Mutual Aid in Wimbledon, and a big thank you to them for joining and partnering with the London Borough of Merton as we help them and direct them as to where the need is greatest. And it's this partnership of the voluntary sector working with the expertise of the staff of the London Borough of Merton that has meant that we are helping as many people as we can. And no doubt the chief executive will go into the numbers game in terms of numbers shielded and so on. Now, on the finances, ministers have said, and they did say this at the outset, that they would urge local authorities to do what they had to do during this crisis, and the money would be there to reimburse them. Sadly, just lately, we've heard ministers change their tune and say that, of course, they'll reimburse, but only for what's been required of them, but no definition of what's required. And so we do hope that councils will be fairly and fully refunded. As at today, and Caroline Holland will go through the detailed figures and the breakdown of the money coming in, the money going out, whether it's costs of COVID, whether it's lost savings, whether it's money coming in that we send immediately out. But as a borough, we're looking at a gap of between 25 to 35 million as a result of this pandemic, all told. And Caroline will break that down for us. The good news on PPE is that we've got 20 days supply. We previously had 26 days, 30 days. We're currently on 20 days supply. It's still a good, safe amount of days worth of PPE. We have, as a council, given 20,000 items of protective personal equipment to care providers that we work with. And you may have heard that London Council is the umbrella body for all London local authorities, including this one, the London Borough of Merton, have united in procuring 48 million items of PPE. So we are well served there. And it's the biggest example of a local authorities getting together, united in purchasing something that is sorely needed. Just on testing and tracing, we have no formal role there, but where someone as a result of testing has been found positive to have the symptoms, then we'll certainly support people who need to be shielded as a result. We have good relations with care homes, the hospitals and the clinical commissioning group. We had a wonderful letter from Dr. Andrew Murray, chair of the clinical commissioning group here in Merton, and I can make that available to members, thanking the borough for the positive way in which we are engaging with all our doctors and the GP practices. And we do have great relations with our 21 care homes here in the London Borough of Merton. Delayed transfer of care, there's been no delays. We work very closely with hospitals, and that's good. And on care homes, we're expecting nationally 600 million from the government. If we break that down, we may get about 1.3 million of that for our 21 care homes here in Merton, but still no regulations about how we're going to disperse that. On schools, there's this thing that schools are not open. They are open. They're open for children who need those schools. Teachers are not working. They're not lying around. They're working at home hard with their pupils, with virtual lessons. And ministers have said that as from the 1st of June, schools can open. Doesn't mean they all have to open on the 1st of June. Ministers have said on the 28th of May, if the 5 tests are agreed, as of the 1st of June, schools can open. This borough will respect the views of head teachers and governors. Different schools will work out what is best for them. We will back them. We will not tell head teachers. We will not tell head teachers and governors what to do. No parents will be penalised in this borough for not sending children if the schools do further open. As I said, they are open. Further opening is where they bring in the years 1, nurseries, reception, year 6. And we are meeting with our trade unions and listening to their questions over this issue. Now, good news again on housing and on the homeless as a result of this pandemic, a sad, very sad pandemic. A number of homeless have been housed. So we've housed 25 homeless people who've been on streets, and working with the GLA and with government, we hope that those 25, provided the funds are available from the government, working with the GLA, that those 25 don't simply go back onto the streets. I think that would be a huge shame. And it's even more critical that we help them, because of those 25, 12 do not have recourse to public funds. So it really beholds everyone, local authorities, government, with adequate funding to make sure that throughout the country, and for those 25 who have somewhere to sleep at night, somewhere comfortable, somewhere warm, that they don't simply go back onto the streets because the pandemic has subsided. One of the big issues at the moment is transport, public transport, trying to keep us off cars, off public transport, moving us onto a safer pavement scene, onto cycling, walking. And so we've introduced an emergency transport strategy that's currently out for consultation, working with Future Merton. People are feeding into that, and we'll do what we can by working with TfL and with others to widen pavements, provide cycle lanes, and encourage people to walk and discourage them to use cars and public transport. But as I said, Future Merton are working up those proposals. The A24 is particularly acute with regard to cycling, and today I was in correspondence with the leader of Wandsworth Council in terms of liaising between Wandsworth and Merton about the A24, and that's liaising with TfL. On domestic violence, awful thing that we face in society today. The figures in Merton are encouraging, very low figures, but one incident of domestic violence is one incident too many. So our one-stop shop will be there working. And on equalities, Rachel Wardell, our director for Children's Schools and Families, is working with the BAMI community, gleaning all the information here in Merton in particular, because as Kevin Fenton, the professor at and director at Public Health England, who I'm joining in a Zoom meeting later this month, as he has said, there's a disproportionality in terms of impact of COVID-19 on our BAMI community, and we're all aware of that. And we will feed into government inquiries, the inquiry by Doreen Lawrence and the inquiry by Trevor Phillips, formerly of the Equality and Human Rights Commission. And just winding up now on businesses, the economy is important. And so we were third in London amongst all boroughs for being quick in dispersing the money given to us by the government. I want to give credit to the government for the monies allocated. They've been true to their word, and we've given 96%, over 24 million out of 25 million to SMEs here in Merton. We've got another 1.3 million in discretionary funding. If we split that into 10,000 per business, that's only 130 businesses. So let's not raise expectations too much, but we'll do our best to get that out as well. Our parks and open spaces have been open, and we rely on people to socially distance. And a big thank you to the police, and a big thank you to Sally Benatar, who sadly is stepping down, and we welcome a new borough commander around October. But a big thank you to the police on enforcement. We're also working well with our members of parliament, working well with Siobhan McDonough, Mitchell and Morden. Free school meals is a big issue she's raised, and with Stephen Hammond, the MP for Wimbledon, who has been very keen to make sure that money is handed to us by government for SMEs, for corner shops, is given out as quickly as possible. Finally, a big thank you to our directors, to councillors, and to everyone for the partnership way in which we're all working. Thank you. I look forward to listening to Jed and to taking your questions. Many thanks.
Thank you very much, Leader. And we'll take questions afterwards. I'd like to come now to the Chief Executive, Jed Curran. Jed, can you?
Yes, thank you, Chair. There is a theory that technology is the name that we give to things which don't quite work reliably or smoothly yet. And I think we may be testing that through the processes that we're going through at the moment. I'd like to start by thanking you, as the leader did, for inviting me to have the opportunity to talk to you and to listen to the questions that you have about the things that have been happening in the borough. And as the leader said, but we should remember right at the beginning that we are talking about a horrible pandemic which has taken far too many lives of people in the borough. And I'd like to express my condolences and sympathy to the families of all those who have sadly passed through this illness. after a while, particularly when you're in a job like mine, there is a danger you start seeing these just as numbers and figures that keep adding up and up and up, and you're thinking about the steps you're going to take and what the consequences are. It's all too easy to forget that every single person who's passed is a tragedy for their family and the people who love them. And we do need to remember that as we think about what we're going to do for the borough in future. I'd also like to thank councillors from all parties who have been incredibly supportive of me, the team I work with, and officers across the council through this very difficult period. One of the things I do is I coordinate all of the South West London authorities, and I have the opportunity through that to speak to my fellow chief executives across our sub-region, and also then to report into the regional activity. And I can tell you that the level of support that we've received in Merton is exemplary. It hasn't been seen everywhere, and it has made our job so much easier. So thank you very much for doing that. The leader has spoken at length, but clearly about the things that have been going on. I don't propose to strain your patience by repeating all of that. I do think that Merton has responded very well to the challenges that were placed before us. Many of the things that the council has been asked to do are not things that we normally do. There have been entirely new services that we've had to implement at very, very short notice, often starting off with a bit of confusion about exactly what was required of us. But in all circumstances, I think we have managed to provide a very good service, sometimes a little bumpy to start with, for our residents. So we have over 6,500 people in Merton who are on our shielding register now. That is almost an exact replica of what the national picture is. So the national figures said about 3% of the population as a whole would be shielded, and we're round about that figure now. The figures that go out in the weekly bulletin are a week out of date. So we're showing that we've contacted 4,500 on the bulletin you would have received recently. We are now up to nearly having contacted everybody, I can tell you, as of today. Not everybody needs support from us, and not everybody needs the food supplies, which were the initial requirement that we're going to put in place. The arrangements with the supermarkets now work much better than they used to. They're not without their problems, but they are working better than they did. And quite often some of the support we're providing might sound reasonably mundane, but actually very important for people who can't get out of the house. So helping them to get their medicines, sometimes arranging dog walkers, all those sorts of things that people take for granted, but actually when you can't do that, require a lot of support. Rather than dwell on all of the things that we have done, I thought I'd just mention some of the challenges that will lay ahead, because part of our conversation might be about what we're going to do as hopefully we come out of the pandemic for residents in Merton, and how we fit within the wider picture in London. And there will be some very severe challenges for us. I think the first thing we have to remember is that as lockdown is lifted, nothing has actually happened to stop the virus being as dangerous as it always was. So we are immediately in danger of seeing another wave of illness work across the community, and have to be able to respond to that very quickly. Nobody's quite clear when that second wave will peak or when it will happen, but the assumption is that once people start circulating and meeting each other, which is exactly what lifting lockdown means, then it is inevitable that the virus will continue to spread within the community, and we will have to be able to respond to that. So many of the constraints which have affected the economy will be relatively long lasting, and even when businesses can start again, they'll be starting in circumstances which means that they will not be as economically productive as they were, and they won't be for quite a long time. So we are heading into a very significant recession, and London will not be immune from that. Indeed, some commentators are saying that London may be particularly poorly affected by the recession. And they're coming to that conclusion because of the things that underpin the London economy. Central London in particular is heavily reliant on people going there for social activity, for restaurants, cafes, bars, clubs. All of those are going to struggle to operate for a considerable period of time into the future. In addition, the city relies on commuter travel into offices. That is probably not going to happen for a very long time to come. most people or many people will be working from home in those jobs, and that will cause its own impact on London. In addition, London has the benefit and burden of incredibly high house prices. Once we establish a position where people can work from almost anywhere, that is going to challenge a model that forces people to want to come and live in London at all. And many people will say, well, if I can work anywhere, why should I pay the price I've got to pay to live in London? And the housing market has been an underpinning of the economy in London as well. So you can readily see how many of these things could have a knock-on effect that means that far from being protected, as the southeastern London often has been in the past from recessions, it might actually be a very different picture altogether. So we are likely to have to cope with all of the social pressures and problems that flow from an economy that is struggling for a long time to come. We don't know what levers the government will pull in relation to that to try and help overcome that situation, but we will have to have our part to play in that. The other thing that's become incredibly apparent from what's happened with the virus is it has underlined and exemplified the great inequality that exists in the country as a whole and in London in particular. I think everybody's familiar with the fact that if you are from the BAME community, the likelihood if you catch the virus that you will be seriously ill or will die is much greater. We also know that if you are poor or live in poorer areas of London, you are much more likely to catch the illness in the first place than not. The reasons for that, people have got lots of hypotheses about at the moment. I suspect it will turn out there isn't one particular reason. They will be layered and complex, and a lot of work is going on at the moment to try and understand what they are. But we are going to have to understand that. And if we are going to build the kind of society that I know everybody on this call wants to see, we're going to have to put a lot more energy and creativity into tackling the inequalities which this has exposed so clearly in London as a whole. That work will involve the council in many of its aspects. An additional problem that we're going to have to think about is how transport functions. You will probably have picked up all the statistics from TfL. At rush hour, TfL can run at about 15% of the traffic that it normally carries. So 85% of passenger journeys can't happen during rush hour if they're going to observe the social distancing requirements. That essentially means that rush hour can't happen in a safe way. So that is going to significantly impact on the way people carry out their lives, carry out their work, which feeds back into people working from home and also undermines the economy of London as a whole. The impacts for Merton are quite significant though, because the way that transport development, road infrastructure, new methods of transport, cycling, development of those greener areas, they've all been underpinned by significant funding from TfL, using the resources that they generate from the profits that they make from the very large numbers of people using their services. They aren't going to be making those profits. In fact, they're in very significant deficit at the moment. They have received additional money from the government to keep their nose above water, but they will not be able to operate in future as the funder for most of that activity in London. Over the last few years, transport funding has essentially been London is isolated and paid for through the TfL funding, and the rest of the country receives national government funding to pay for things. So you'll be familiar with the announcements about potholes money and all that sort of thing that happen. That's always out of London because London itself had to cover its own costs. With TfL being technically bankrupt, where that money is going to come from is it's an open question at the moment, but that's going to place very significant stresses on repairing and maintaining the road infrastructure and the physical infrastructure that we work in, and is going to need a solution which we're working on at the moment, but nobody's absolutely clear what that will be. Finally, and we'll close at that, we do have the ambition, and there's a bit of a hackneyed phrase now, is that we should try and build it back better, so that whatever we do replace should be better than what was there before as much as we possibly can. And that absolutely is the ambition. We are working on a climate change strategy, which will help us with doing that. But the resourcing that's necessary to make all of that work is going to be very challenging. over the next couple of years. And when Caroline speaks to you in a moment or two, she'll exemplify what that means for us locally in the council, but also there is a national context to that too. I'll close there, Chair, and I'm happy to answer any questions if I can.
Yes, thank you very much. We will now take questions. It would be helpful if you could say whether your question is directed to either to Stephen or to Jed, or indeed both. It is my intention to allow a supplementary also to your question. I'm going to start with where I've been notified of questions in advance. That's going to be Sally first, and then I'll come to Paul Kohler. So Sally, if we could take your question, and then I'll come to you.
Sorry, I was late, but I was there watching you all, but not on the screen. Yeah, so sorry about that being late. I've got a few questions. So really mine are related to what is the breakdown of deaths due to between the east and the west of Merton, and also the number of deaths relating in the east and the west. Is that
Thank you. So,
clear?
is it all right if I respond, Chair?
Yeah, please, yes.
Thank you, Councillor Kenny, for sending through the questions. On my system, you were breaking up a little bit, so if you don't mind, I'll just read out the questions again that you asked me. That's almost putting off the fatal moment where I explained that some of them I can answer and some of them I can't, but I'll try my best. So the first question was, what is the breakdown of deaths comparing the east to the west of Merton? The second question was, what is the breakdown of deaths in care homes comparing the east and west of Merton? There's then a question about the task group on diabetes in the Southeast Asian community in Merton, and are there any deaths linked to this group? And are most deaths in Merton linked to people with underlying health issues? So I asked our public health team to try and respond to those questions. I have to say that public health officers are incredibly scrupulous about the data that they will release and are prepared to issue. And amongst the most confusing set of data is all the data that the country gathers in relation to deaths. The figures are almost always precisely wrong, but when expressed as a generality, generally correct. So we don't yet have audited approved data that separates out for the east and west of the borough deaths in care homes or in other settings. The ONS is trying to produce those, but there isn't a settled agreed method of setting that out. So what they were prepared to confirm is that the actual overall COVID deaths in the borough are approximately 60% of those deaths have been in the east of the borough, and 40% of those have been people who are residents in the west of the borough. They can't provide the data in relation to care homes currently, though as soon as that is available, we will obviously circulate it to everybody. And we don't yet have via the NHS or Public Health England breakdowns that give us the data about people's underlying conditions or their specific medical conditions. However, the Director of Public Health did indicate that it is established that diabetes is a condition that makes you particularly vulnerable to the illness, and nationally the data indicates that people with diabetes are more likely to fall seriously ill or unfortunately die if they do contract the disease. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Let me just ask Sally, is there anything there you want to come back with by way of a supplementary? Sally, we're not hearing you.
I've That's it. The only other follow-up question to that, it is a very difficult one, and I think the care of people comes first. But my concern is, do you have the statistics for how many care homes throughout Merton are council-run care homes or are independently run care homes? And my concern for asking that question is, independently run care homes are running at a profit, and therefore, are we supporting them in funding this through the crisis, or are they funding themselves by taking that money out of the profit they make by having people in their care? Thank you.
You happy for me to respond, Chair?
Please do, yes.
Thank you, Chair. So the underlying financial model for care homes is actually the other way round. The self-funders and private funders end up paying significantly more for their care in the homes than local authority beds. And the reason for that is that because we can block purchase and we can guarantee that the beds will be used, we get a discounted rate. The council doesn't own any individual private homes. So the ones in the borough are all private enterprises. Some of them we are by far and away the major user of them. In others, we purchase occasional beds. But it isn't the case in that circumstance that the public purse is subsidising the private contributors. It's actually the other way around. We do have a small set of homes that we provide for people with learning difficulties, particularly where we're trying to assist people to live independent lives with some support around them. And those are the homes that the council itself owns and runs at the moment.
Okay, thank you. Let me come next to Councillor Kohler, who also submitted his question in advance.
Thank you, Jed and Stephen, for speaking for all of us, and the sympathy to those who've suffered from this terrible disease. And thank you both as well for pointing out, even in the midst of this terrible disease, there are opportunities. And I'm pleased with the borough looking at the transport strategy and seeing how that can embrace the opportunities this awful pandemic offers us. But specifically, of course, money will be the issue for trying to rethink our transport strategy. And then I was asking about the ward allocation scheme. To what extent are those monies, have they been spent? Is there much left? And can that be used to improve our pedestrian and cycle access post the pandemic?
Please, Jed, would you like to respond to that?
Thank you, Councillor Kohler, for those kind words, and also thank you for sending me a copy of the question in advance. So a significant proportion of the monies are as yet unspent, so there is £290,000 and some pence available that could be used in the way that you've set out. It would need consent from members to do so, and this is the only pot of money which has been distributed widely so that ward members can have a say about how it's spent. So swooping in and taking it for one particular item might need some explaining and discussing, but it is a sum of money which has not been spent and could be spent in this area. Although £290,000 sounds like a lot of money, because it is a lot of money in personal terms, in terms of actually spending it on physical changes in the borough, it wouldn't go very far or fund very much. What it might be able to do is fund provision of bicycles that can be used from school bases or that sort of thing. You could probably do something like that. If we were to think about it in terms of providing physical cycle lanes or that kind of area, it probably wouldn't achieve as much as might be hoped. Thank you.
Thank you, Jed. Paul, do you want to come back with a supplementary?
I have a question on something else, but you want me to wait for that?
Yes, I think so, if you don't mind.
Okay. Simply on that question then, Jed, is there, I see your issue, of course, this has been money which councils have a say in, and that's a very valuable resource for us. Could we go, is there a halfway house where we could tweak the criteria we can currently recommend it for to address what are the new criteria we're now thinking about in this new world we're living in?
Yes, you could do that.
Good, thank you, Chair. I think most people want to ask a question. I'm going to go purely on the hands I saw coming up first, and that's Nick McLean. Nick,
thank you, Chair. I'd like to begin by thanking the Leader of the Council and the Chief Executive for their respective reports. And of course, I'd also like to echo the Leader's comments and condolences in relation to those, sadly, who have lost their lives. And of course, I and the Conservative group would also like to take the opportunity to congratulate the Chief Executive, his officer team, along with our dedicated council and social staff, with a special mention to those on the front line and confronting this dreadful virus. Along with the voluntary sector, they can be all very proud of the response to this crisis. Chair, as Leader of the Opposition, I benefit from weekly briefings from the Chief Executive, and I thank him for that. The briefings enabled me to ask a number of questions with regard to the Council's response and also to provide feedback to the Conservative group. I also spoke with Councillor Alan Brittis, and I am pleased to see that he has recovered from his own COVID-19 battle. As we move through this pandemic and we look to the future with regard to health provision for Merton, my question is to the Leader of the Council and relates to the planned multi-million-pound government investment for Epsom and St Helier NHS Trust to completely refurbish existing buildings and develop a new major acute hospital. Councillor Alan Brittis, in the Cabinet Papers of the 23rd of March, the Council sets out its thinking on the response to the Improving Healthcare Together consultation. Point 2.26.7 talks about the minimal change to hospital model. For some clarification on this very important investment, is this something the administration is moving towards supporting?
So the administration's position on St Helier Hospital has always been consistent, irrespective of the model. And we've had various models over the years and consultations that have cost quite a lot of money to the public purse. Our policy is that whichever way you look at it, that St Helier Hospital serves those most in need, those who need a hospital next door to them, and therefore whatever the configuration that the NHS is working on, we believe that the main hospital should stay where it is, that's St Helier, but also that its main services, maternity, A&E, should stay where they are. And where there is the wherewithal, especially, there'll be a revision or review of monies to be spent, if that is possible, and there's already a preference for a brand new hospital in Belmont, in Sutton, our preferred option, our policy is for that to be at St Helier site.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Leader. Councillor McLean, do you have a supplementary there?
I do. Look, thank you very much for that. The Conservative group, of course, we favour the 3-hospital model and, of course, the preferred site, St Helier. But if the consultation does not agree with the Council's submission, then what options are the administration considering, and is a judicial review one of them?
Well, all options are on the table. This is a local authority that has a history of support for St Helier Hospital, so all options are on the table.
Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. Let me come next to Natasha Ryans. And Natasha, if you could say who your question is for.
I'm not sure. I think it's for Jed, actually. But I just wanted to echo the sentiments of how sad it is that so many lives have been lost. But also, I just wanted to say thank you to all of our residents for being so patient and pulling up their sleeves and getting involved and in ways that I just never thought were possible. So it just proves how amazing Merton is. I just wanted to ask on domestic violence. I think comparatively to Wandsworth and Sutton, I think we are, in terms of numbers, doing a lot better. But I wonder, are we worried, or are we satisfied that that's not because of underreporting and because we're maybe not getting the news out about how to report if you're in fear and if you need help?
Jed, can I invite you to respond?
Certainly. Yes, thank you, Councillor Irons. So you're right about the statistics. We are seeing about the same level of reported domestic violence to the police as we would if you looked at the figures a year ago, would be about the same. So we haven't seen an increase. We had anticipated that there would be a significant increase, and indeed we acquired additional properties that we could move people into if those cases came forward, but we haven't as yet had to use them. And we did increase the publicity that we've given out. When we look at the data that we receive from the helplines that are available, they do show an increase in calls that have been taking place to them. But for some reason that none of us fully yet understand, those aren't converting into contacts to the police, whereas in ones within particular, within our region, they have converted into increases. So we don't as yet know, if I'm absolutely honest, Councillor Hines, why that is. And it may be some of our data hasn't got out to people, but we are actually quite good in this area in terms of the work that we do to communicate with residents. So we don't as yet know. It may be that there's simply a time lag, and certainly part of our modelling assumes that once lockdown starts to release a bit, there might be a spike that comes then, and we're ready to respond to that.
Thank you, Jed. Natasha, do you have a supplementary to that? Fine, okay. Let me come on to Mansour Ahmad. Mansour, you
Thanks, Chair and dear members. First of all, I like to congratulate and really appreciate the roles which Merton has taken during the pandemic situation. My question is regarding crime and disorder. What preparation Merton has taken for the more volatile and agitated society following the end of the coronavirus lockdown?
And that question for the Chief Executive, can I ask?
Yes, please.
So crime and disorder.
Thank you.
Jeb, sorry, but let's unmute Jeb, please.
Yeah. Sorry, it always looks like you're mouthing abuse when you can't hear the person. So I was just saying, I heard that I had a technical glitch in the middle, so I heard it was a question about lockdown, but I didn't hear the actual details of the question. I'm sorry, Mr. Ahmed, you wouldn't mind repeating it for me?
Yeah, my question is with regard to crime and disorder. What preparation Merton has taken for a more volatile and agitated society following the end of the coronavirus lockdown?
Okay. Yes, thank you very much. That was clear. Thank you. So we work very closely with the police. I have a regular call with the Borough Commander, Sally Benatar, who the leader mentioned in his earlier presentation. And we also have our own enforcement officers through a company called Kingdom, who we used to use just for environmental crimes with people littering. We've actually used them to work alongside the police in all of the public spaces to help ensure that enforcement takes place there. And we are developing plans with the police for how we manage the next wave once lockdown is lifted, to ensure that we maintain public order and assist them in their responsibilities in that regard. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have a supplementary, Mansour? Is that okay?
No, thank you.
Okay. If I can move, just checking through. Councillor Gretton, can I come to you?
Yep. Thank you very much.
And if you could say who your question is for?
Chair, thank you very much. My question is for Councillor Alan Brittis as leader of Merton Council. And by the way, if I also have a question later for our Chief Executive, will there be, if there is time, is that permissible under tonight's procedures, Chair?
Yeah, so far so good, yes.
I'd just like to say, echo the words of people, members who've spoken so far, and actually say huge thanks to the residents of Merton they're doing such a fantastic job in every street, every ward across the borough in Wimbledon and Mitcham, Morden. People are helping. They've got all these wonderful COVID support groups, and people are collecting groceries, delivering them to the elderly and the vulnerable and all this type of thing. And they're doing a fantastic job. So I just like to to say thank you to all the residents of Merton, and doing a great job my own ward of Wimpton Park as well for that. I'm sure we all support that. Just like to refer to funding. I thank the leader of the council, Councillor Alan Brittis, for his reference to the funding from central government. I think we've had about, as a package of about, it's north of £50 million so far that's coming to the borough by way of a funding package. When you look at the local business support and all the direct support, and I hope there's going to be more coming in. I suspect that number's going to get a lot higher than that when you add it all up. Transport is obviously such a key issue. Everyone's been talking about transport. Everyone's talking about cycling and better neighbourhoods and greening spaces and things like that. And in addition to getting these funds from central government, there's also the opportunity to get other funds as well. And you mentioned the GLA, but of course the GLA is basically funded by central government and by the residents of Merton with the council tax precept. Just in terms of accessing that funding, I just wanted to ask Councillor Alan Brittis, as leader of Merton Council, there's been quite a few funding opportunities through the GLA. There's a Liverpool Neighbourhoods Fund, there's the cycling infrastructure funds, and I note that Merton was just about the only council which chose not to apply for the cycling infrastructure fund, for example, chose not to apply. Every council in London applied. They all got, apart from Merton, possibly. They all got exactly what they asked for, which was huge sums of money, £500,000 in that instance. For example, Liverpool Neighbourhoods Fund, which has been going for the past 2 years. We haven't seen Merton apply, but that fund is available for really good improvements for the residents of Merton, like improving the public realm, greenery, new cycling routes, walking routes for school children, all that sort of thing. And the fund was about £100 million north of that, and you could have applied for £10 million, come back into the borough, help the residents, and really lift our borough. You chose not to apply, and can the leader of any of those funds, actually, each one of those £10 million for Liverpool neighbourhoods, or £500,000 leader the cycling infrastructure fund. Can you give the residents of Merton some more information on how come we didn't apply for any of those funds? Because it's cost our borough an awful lot of money, but by not having requested those funds, which are available to Merton if you wanted to apply for them.
Thank you.
That was such a long question that I think I'm going to say, no supplementary to that, Ed, but Leader, please, yeah. Leader, can you respond, please?
Yes, sure. So for the big one, the Mini Holland, we put in a lot of effort for that one. That was a few years ago, I admit, but that was a big application by the London Borough of Merton. And that was talking about millions of pounds, turning Merton into, as the application read, a Mini Holland. I think we do need to look at our capacity, our officer time, and our strength in these applications. But I'll reflect and look at whether it was and is that straightforward, that you apply and you get the money. Certainly, I'll reflect and look at that for you, Ed. If you're saying everyone who applied got money and the only borough in London that didn't apply was Merton and it didn't get money, then I'll certainly reflect on that.
Thank you, Leader.
Yeah, that was the cycle infrastructure fund. Yeah.
Let me come on to Councillor Henry. Joan, you have a question, please. Joan, can you go ahead with your question?
Okay, thank you. And I'd like to say thanks to everyone for all your support throughout the borough at this very challenging time. Okay, my question is to the Chief Executive. We all understand and we all know that most death happens within the care homes. And I'd like to find out whether or not they weren't informed early about the virus so they can prepare themselves and educate their staff and how to take precaution and why this really happens. That's a very big concern, because to be honest with you, for me, I found it very difficult to understand, because people in care home, they're not really going on the street and mixing with a wide area of people, more than having staff in and out. The next thing is, how are we as a council going to prepare that this doesn't happen again in the future, whether or not any issues or concern, occurs? Thank you.
Thank you, Joan. If I can invite Jed to respond.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Councillor Henry. We were fortunate in Merton that we have comparatively few care homes in the borough. We have 21. Some of our neighbouring boroughs have over 100 care homes. And we have developed very good working relationships with our care homes over the years. So in January and February, when it became apparent that the virus was in this country, we worked very closely with our care homes to identify what the risks were and to help them plan as far as possible to mitigate those risks, including agreeing plans with them that they could have fewer residents in the homes, and agreeing that we would pay them more money, because obviously they would lose financially from that, but it would make it easier for them to maintain the social distancing. And we also shared with them all of the PPE equipment that we had that helped them manage the situation. So the number of deaths in care homes in Merton is very low compared with the national picture. And those arrangements are unusual. I mention our small numbers of homes because I'm not trying to claim a virtue that we don't have, nor necessarily criticise colleagues in other boroughs. If you have very many more homes, it is difficult to sustain the relationships that are necessary to have the kind of conversations as quickly as you need to when something like the pandemic strikes. We are working with those homes, and indeed there is now a much greater national focus on the whole issue of how care homes are funded and operate. And I am confident that through those arrangements, homes will be in a much better place in the future. Those plans have yet to crystallise. The government has made a number of slightly coded statements about the fact that they recognise that the care sector needs a proper level of investment, and there needs to be a full review about how that's carried out. And that could mean either significant more investment into the model that currently exists, or it could mean some form of nationalisation of that service, either by putting it directly into the health service and have a true single national health and care service, or some hybrid element where it's part of a national service but delivered locally, a little like the way the Housing Benefit Service works, which is a national programme which is administered and overseen at a local level, but or some other version of that which may emerge. But it's a matter that I know the government is putting a huge amount of attention and focus on at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Jed. Joan, do you have a supplementary or satisfied then? Good. Councillor McCabe, waiting patiently. You have a question? Peter, we're not hearing you.
I've unmuted now. I was expecting somebody.
Okay. Okay. Good.
Thank you. My question. Well, two comments. Firstly, I welcome the leader's statement that schools won't be forced to open because they have been opened for throughout the crisis for key workers and for children at risk. So I welcome that statement. I'm disappointed to hear that the government have reneged on the promise to reimburse councils when they've told them to spend what is necessary. But my big issue, my big concern is the impact on the voluntary sector, because I'm aware that all the events that they use to fund their activities, the London Marathon, for example, has been cancelled, the fun runs, the coffee mornings, the fairs, all of those things have stopped. And yet the sector has been magnificent in terms of its response to this crisis. And we need to ensure that there is a voluntary sector in Merton when this is all over. Because if we don't do that, then it will cost a great deal more to pick up the pieces afterwards. And I'd like to hear from, I don't know if it's the leader or the chief executive, what steps we are taking to protect the voluntary sector, the vital voluntary sector in Merton.
So let me ask, who wants to take that one first? Stephen.
I think both of us. Yes, we're very proud of the voluntary sector here in the London Borough of Merton, and we do not want it to suffer, especially given the Herculean efforts it's undertaken to support both the council and the residents and those in need. And so what I intend to do is to sit down with London councils, with other borough leaders as well here in London, and see what money there is for the charitable sector within London councils. Sit down with the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, about the voluntary sector, and with the Chair of London Councils, Peter John. This is a debate that we're having at a pan-London level. I also chair the South London Partnership with our neighbouring boroughs, and I'll be talking to them as well. And perhaps a summit of the voluntary sector immediately after the pandemic, hopefully as soon as possible, either the pandemic finishes, but as soon as possible, that we have a wholesale. Now, where the council has a fiduciary relationship or a tax relationship with the voluntary sector, for example, we give 80%, I understand, on the business rates relief, offset, and so on. We'll have a look at all that. Any licensing fees, we'll have a look at all that. Anything that would safeguard what we have here, which is a very proud voluntary sector and proud of its relationship with the borough. We'll do everything we can, pan-London and individually as a borough.
Okay, thank you, Leader. Anything you want to add, Jed?
Thank you for your answer, Stephen.
Just to confirm that the real strength of the voluntary sector in Merton has been shown over the last 8 weeks. The response from the established voluntary sector and a whole host of new groups have just emerged to help with the crisis is quite extraordinary, really. And when I reflect that we've been talking for several months in the jargon of these things about social capital and how we build it in the borough, and to actually see that it's actually there already. They're not waiting for the council to breathe life into it. We've got fantastic groups of residents. The challenge to us is how we help develop that subsequently in what will be a very difficult financial situation. Councillor McCabe is absolutely right.
Good, thank you, Jed. If everyone's had an opportunity to ask one question, I would like to ask a question I have here. Councillor Pritchard is uncharacteristically quiet, but anyway, let me go ahead with my question. And it's around this phrase, you've already mentioned it, Jed, and I think I got it from you originally, actually, building it back better. And what are your thoughts and your aspirations for Merton when we think about that? You've mentioned already our plans for action on the climate. Are there other ways in which we could be doing things differently and better in future, departing from how we've done them in the past?
I think,
please,
if I can just come in.
Yes, please, Leader. Yeah.
We all want this pandemic to finish. We all want it to go away and not to come back, and a new dawn for everyone. I think immediately after a decent lockdown has been put away on the tests and on reasonable grounds, and we're all back, I think the first thing a borough like Merton needs to do is to see what the wounds are, what the damage is, and to see how we can repair and look after those most hurt. So we have a programme of bridging the gap, and I feel that immediately after the pandemic, that gap may despite all our best efforts, may actually be wider. And so immediately after the pandemic, it will be the council's duty and hard work to see where the hurt is, where the wounds are, where the damage is most, and try and get that repaired and so on. Then after that, Peter, you're quite right. Are there better, leaner, cleverer ways of operating? And people have said a green recovery, bridging the gap recovery, and so on. And so, yes, I think we can look at all that, but we mustn't raise expectations. There won't be much money around, but that would concentrate our minds. And that's where we're grateful to having a chief executive like Jed, who over the years has seen us through these difficult times. These are very, very challenging times. And I will be engaging with all the other borough leaders at a pan-London level to see new ways of working. But I'm sure that the chief executives have also been in discussion. So over to Jed.
Yes, please, Jed, if you want to.
Thank you, Leader. I'll just add 2 points to that, if I may. The first is I think we should work closely with our partners and try and use the leverage that we have to gain things for the borough. I'm thinking in particular of health colleagues. The pressure on health will be, I think, again, to think about the acute sector before they think about anything else. And whilst that's important, it's actually not going to help with many of the inequalities issues. So I think we can help them focus in on those issues. And if they do, I think they'll realise that actually investing in the primary care, in community care, thinking about how they develop the social prescribing, which is actually working quite well in parts of the borough, but actually could contribute much more, would actually help. So I think we could assist them in their thinking and direction. And then secondly, I was painting a bleak picture for central London, but actually that might help parts of Merton. It's not inconceivable that a place like the centre of Wimbledon, for example, would be a place where people would value smaller serviced offices that they could use, they could drop into and drop out of whilst working from home in an environment which they found congenial. And indeed, we could look at many parts of the borough where we have the benefit of our open green spaces, that are places that are actually quite good to live in, that people are happy to bring their families up in, and without much significant investment, we could look to develop the kind of smaller low-level office infrastructure that would assist in that kind of development. So it's an ill wind that blows no good, as my mum used to say. So there could be some possibilities for us here in this too.
Yes, thank you very much, Jed. And just reflecting on that, I must say, having walked the length and breadth of our borough, from the northernmost tip of Putney Heath down to the southernmost reaches of Mitcham Common, not all on the same day, we have a lot to be proud of and to commend in our borough. 2 people indicated that they would like to ask a second question. If we do that, can I ask that it is quite brief, both in question and answer? Let me come to Paul first. Councillor Kohler.
Thank you. And as a small business owner and councillor, can I thank you, Jed, and you, Stephen, with the speed with which Merton paid out the monies to businesses. It's so crucial this time. I'm particularly concerned about those businesses falling through the gaps and the discretionary fund. I thought chiropractors, the English language schools, some of the dental services. Some non-chains were just over the 51,000 business rate threshold. Now, I know you haven't got a vast amount of money for them, but what criteria are you going to apply in applying these discretionary funds? Because some of them are really struggling now.
The criteria are set, despite it being called discretionary, the criteria are set by the government. There's 4 criteria, and Jed will hopefully talk us through them. It is 1.3 million. We could give less than £10,000, so stretch it out a bit more than 130 businesses. One of the things we've done, we've engaged with Diana Sturg from the Chamber of Commerce. She'll be on a panel to make sure there's an independent element and someone steeped in the local business community who understands the businesses. But there are already criteria that businesses may actually fall through again, having fallen through the main grant. They're now going to fall through, but we'll do what we can. Jed, I don't know if you got those 4 criteria to hand.
Please, Jed, if you...
Yeah, sadly, I can't give you the precise definition of the 4, but what they're targeting is those businesses which don't pay business rates, because the original allocation was based on relief against the business rate you paid. So businesses that are nested within other businesses that pay rates. So if you think of Ely's, where you'd have concessions within Ely's, the business rate are paid by Ely's, but the individual business wasn't, so they got no payments through it. It's also aimed at charities which had charitable relief from business rates. So they were not able to access the funds, so they're able to apply as well. As the leader says, we've decided to set up a panel to help advise us as to the final criteria that the council would apply, and to do the difficult job of selecting businesses once we send out the request for bids for that. On the panel, as the leader said, is Diana Stirk from the Chamber of Commerce, and Simon Shimmons from MBSE has also agreed to be a part of the panel to help us in making those decisions. I think the leader said in his opening speech that the sums of money that we have to allocate are actually quite small in the end. So we won't be able to relieve a lot of the pressure. And certainly the businesses who wrote to me initially with the first allocation of monies tended to be those who are at the warehousing and wholesaling end of business selling into the retail trade. And they simply don't fall into the new categories that have been put forward either, although their need is clear and stark, and it is very difficult for them. Thank you.
Thank you, Jed. Councillor Gretton.
Just a quick one.
Can I ask you to be right out of character here and make it really brief?
Quick, just as our chief executive, just on the data, I just noticed there's quite a big difference between the government data and Merton Council's data. I know Jed has already kind of referred to that, but the council's data is totally in agreement as to the total number of cases today in the London Borough Merton population, about 205,000, which is I think about 605 cases or something. But if you look at the government data, you know, that number rose actually 3 or 4 weeks ago. So the government agrees with the council on the data. But as for 27th of April, I think the government data showed there was something like 680 or 683 cases. So according to the government data, there's only been a handful of new cases since nearly 4 weeks in the London Borough of Merton, which I don't know if too many people are aware of that. But according to the council's figures, there's about a dozen, currently I think running at the rate of a dozen new cases a week. So I was wondering if the chief executive could just comment on that. There's quite a big difference there between the data. Thank you.
Jed, I don't know whether you need notice for that one, but can you have a go at it?
Well, I think I said in answer to a questions earlier that all of these statistics are generally correct and particularly wrong. And what you find in each time you look at a discrepancy between the data is that they're using slightly different parameters or slightly different definitions. So it produces slightly different outcomes. So the underlying point that I think Councillor Gresham was making, which is that we are seeing a very significant decline now in cases in the borough, is absolutely true. And that's borne out by all of the data that we've seen so far. And the rate of decline is increasing constantly as well. I would have to go back through the individual data sets, or more honestly, get somebody else to go back through all the data sets to actually answer the specific question. I'm very happy to do that if Councillor Gresham wouldn't mind just dropping me a line.
Thank you, Jed. And one last question from Councillor McLean. Councillor McLean?
Yeah, thank you very much. I would actually like to go back to Councillor Kohler's question on the discretionary funds. I have the guidance that was published on the 13th of May in front of me. And it clearly says in point 17, local authorities have discretion to make payments of any amount under £10,000. It'll be for local authorities to adapt this approach to local circumstances, such as providing support for micro businesses with fixed costs, etc. So can we have further clarification? Because the guidance clearly says that it's for local authorities to adapt the criteria to meet local circumstances.
Can I come in on that, Chair?
Please, yes.
Yeah, so that is correct. So the guidance sets out the areas where they think they would like us to focus our attention, but then does say if the council wishes to depart from that, it could do so, and that is correct. And I'm sure that debate will take place amongst the panel who finally settle on how the allocations would be made. I suspect when the leader was talking a few minutes ago, he would have had in his mind the fact that when we make these allocations, there will be a small number of people who are pleased and a lot larger number of people who will be dissatisfied that they didn't receive the monies. That's a lot harder conversation to have with somebody when you've not given them the money when they met the criteria the government had suggested, if you've departed from that criteria. So I suspect most councils will end up allocating the money in accordance with the guidelines that the government have indicated. So you are absolutely right, Councillor McLean, and I'm sorry if my answer misled anybody. It is open to the council to depart from those criteria should it so wish. Thank you.
Thank you, Jed. I see Julia, you want to come in? Can't hear you. Can you unmute?
Sorry, I just wanted to point out that Councillor Pritchard's been trying to ask a question.
Yes, thank you, Julia. I did spot that. Owen has come to life. Owen, your question, please.
If you looked in the chat panel, you realise I came to first off, can I say thank you for everyone's efforts over this period. I've sort of seen firsthand how well the response has been to operationalise the efforts at the council level. I also want to sort of thank specifically the workhorses of local government who don't get seen on Zoom conferences like this, and perhaps aren't romanticised in the press quite the way that others are, but really are the unseen workhorses of the public sector at this time. My question is not looking at the operational response now, but I understand totally everyone's focus on that. But when we move to the recovery phase, we're already talking about 25 to 35 million over the next year or so in costs. Over the 4 years, revenues and increases in costs, we could easily see that increase to the 50 million mark or beyond. This committee just before, a few months ago saw that there'd been no economic strategy since 2012, right? Do you think now is the time, given the change, and you yourself have talked about the need perhaps to intervene so that we can make the most of, as a borough as opportunities, now is the time to actually to have an economic strategy that defines how we're going to approach our role in the rescue, the recovery and the reform of Britain's economy?
Sound quality was not good there, but Leader, did you get enough of that to better answer?
Yeah, yes.
Thank you. Please.
Councillor Pritchard makes a good point with regard to going forward with an economic strategy. The 25 to 30 million gap equates to about a quarter of the council tax take. That's quite a hit, and it'll be very, very difficult if the government does not keep to its promise of reimbursing all local authorities. A number of them will struggle, and we will struggle as well. So we'll do all we can, everything we can. Over the years, we've had base budgets, we've looked at lean models and so on. So we'll look at everything that we can that is feasible to plug that gap. But we hope that the government will keep to its word. But Councillor Pritchard makes a good point that, as I said, we'll look at everything.
You have a supplementary?
Thank you, Stephen. I just want to be clear. I'm not talking about a financial strategy for the council itself. I'm talking about a local economic strategy to promote the recovery, the rescue, the recovery and the reform of the council. So what we do is better, as you said, and as Jed said, that we give a helping hand to people to sort of mitigate the risks and the impacts, but also to make the most of opportunities that the rebalancing is going to cause.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the distinction between finances, plugging gaps, raising money, and an economic strategy. Yeah, we need to look at both. Yeah.
Thank you, Leader. And I'm going to come to a close on this item now. Others have expressed their thanks to the staff of the council and indeed to the voluntary sector for the dedication and commitment they've shown. And I'm sure we as members of the Commission will wish to endorse that. I suppose what this does show us is that those who work in the public sector do have an ethos of service, which to the community is actually quite humbling to witness, and it is something for which we should be eternally grateful. And I hope I can speak for all of you in recording that. Good. Come on to our next item, item 5. Jed has kindly agreed to stay for this. And this is how we plan our work programme for the remainder of the COVID-19 pandemic. I trust we've all read the paper. And I wonder perhaps, Jed, if you could start by setting out for us ways in which we can help you through scrutiny, but at the same time ensure we don't get in the way. Can you set out for us the parameters, if you like, of the support you can offer scrutiny at this time, things we can do that are constructive and helpful to you, equally set out where there are limits to what you can do, because we are in exceptional circumstances. We cannot expect just to carry on as we might in other times expect to do.
Certainly, Chair, thank you. And thank you for the invitation to address you on this point. I said right at the beginning of the last item that we'd been extremely unfortunate in Merton that members had been so understanding across the parties of the need to create a bit of space so that we could respond quickly to the crisis. And indeed, at one point, powers were transferred to me as the Chief Executive to take action in almost any direction I wished to help shape the response to the pandemic. I have to say that I personally found that extremely uncomfortable, and I am pleased that we've started having some council meetings and indeed that we're now debating how scrutiny can best function to work in future. The difficulty, as you rightly identified, Chair, is that we need to ensure that the energy and effort that goes into scrutiny isn't so disproportionate that we're then not able to continue the response to the pandemic as it is still with us and the actions that's necessary to manage the recovery. However, it would be entirely inappropriate for me to try and pretend that this is going to go on forever and therefore, unfortunately, you're not allowed to scrutinise anything that we're doing. It wouldn't be healthy and it wouldn't be helpful. My own view and hope, and certainly is what's happened in scrutiny in the past, is that the wisdom and observation of people from different perspectives looking at problems we're trying to tackle is only helpful and only adds value to what we are doing. So it would be helpful if you can continue to carry out scrutiny functions. What I would really say is that I would crave some tolerance from you in that it might not be possible for all the officers that you would wish to see at a given time to attend everything, or they might not be able to produce the detailed reports that you are used to receiving, and it may be that it would be a live discussion that you'd be having with an officer rather than necessarily having had the benefit of a properly crafted and considered report. But my feeling is that if you are happy to work within those constraints until resources are more freely available, it can only be helpful to have members engaged in thinking about the issues facing the council and bringing forward ideas and thoughts, either that identify things we could have done better so we can improve, or identifying issues ahead on the horizon that we're so busy with the day-to-day that we don't have the chance to properly reflect on, that would assist in the council improving its services and things being better for residents overall. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Jed. The paper puts forward an interim model for scrutiny that would focus essential scrutiny through the Commission. And I'd like to hear comments on that and views as to whether that is the route that we wish to take just for the next 2-3 months. Councillor McLean.
First of all, thank you, Jed, for our Chief Executive, for outlining, and we fully appreciate the pressures, and in no way do we want to overwhelm officers. The Conservative group are actually in favour of all the panels opening. I also think that this could be a good opportunity for us to maybe rethink scrutiny. The LGA peer review talked about excessive reports. In fact, on average 295 pages. Perhaps we could go down with slimmer reports, more Q&As with officers, and in particular, more questioning of cabinet members as well. So I think that's really where we would like to see it starting to go. I appreciate the pressures the officers are under, but I would also like to see more questioning of the cabinet members. So I do think, I understand the pressures, and I think, yes, we've got to take it slowly, and in no way do we at any stage overwhelm officers, but I would like to see all the scrutiny panels reopened.
Yes, thank you for that, Councillor McLean. Let me come on to Paul. Councillor Kohler.
I'd just like to echo that as well. I think there's a real chance here for us to engage with cabinet members. We don't want to put more work on officers, but there is things that can be done. And that dialogue, that live Q&A would help us see what the goals are and help us work together to achieve them. I think a lot of the time we don't use backbench councillors, opposition councillors as much as we should. Here's a chance to do so via scrutiny, in a non-political way, or not party political way, and we actually scrutinise what's happening and then have a shared endeavour. I saw with the transport strategy, which is, it's a good first start. It's a bit ad hoc though. It talks about talking to councillors. No one ever talked to me about the transport strategy in Trinity. I'm not sure if others were talked to, but no councillor I know was talked to. Getting them on board would help, because we're on an endeavour that we're all part of.
Thank you for that, Councillor Kohler. Any other comments here? Councillor Pritchard. Owen?
Thank you, Chair. So I, like all things, think this is probably a little bit about balance, because we all know how strapped people are, and we know that we're about to set up a big tracing function, and the new T3, the track trace test plus certify is going to bring a whole burden both in planning and delivery for council officers. And I'm really mindful, because I've seen it, how trashed many of them have been. I'm also kind of aware that we're also at a point where we're entering a kind of a pause between the response and the recovery, actually. Strategically, I think when we look back, we'll see this period, this summer, as that focus where we begin to normalise things. And if in that pause, we give a certain degree of latitude to the officers to reset, and so that we can just then focus on the strategic rather than the operational. Now, I understand that what everyone else said, but it is also about balance. But I also think that some of the task groups, for example, I sit on 3 committees, chairing one of them, and I sit on 3 task groups, chairing 2 of them. Now, I can say that the 2 task groups that I chair, that for commercialisation and procurement, well, we could probably draw a stump over them, hold them as a draft, note the evidence, but really the world has changed a lot. And until we really come to terms with where we are over the next few months, I don't want to engage Rosie or Julia or anyone else from the extended Merton community in providing evidence or writing these things up when the situation they're reporting on is no longer extant. I do think that the priorities that were suggested on page 9, finance, adult social care, number of people, children, crime, councillors' plan for recovery, are all worth looking at, really. So I think instead of looking at the structures that we've had before in the task groups or whatever, that we pause for a moment and think about what are the priorities and what do we want to scrutinise and how do we do it, because actually it questions the structure that we traditionally use scrutiny for. Where we have CYP, we have sustainable communities and like, and how we're going to address scrutiny going forward, because things look very different now. So rushing into and just coming up with a new solution that looks like 80% of the old solution might not be what we want. And that's my take on it.
Thank you, Rowan, for that. And I would like to endorse that. I mean, the work we did together on the commercialisation task group, you know, where is that now? We suddenly, Spelthorne doesn't look so smart, does it, with its 1 billion of property assets? So it will be such a different world, and it would be wrong, I feel, to be committing to new reviews at this stage until we see how the dust settles and how it starts to look.
I do think those 5 priorities, 2.14 to 2.18, are a good starter for 10 in what we as a group, taking in the spirit of everything that you've said to do, that people have said to do, is scrutinising cabinet members, having discussions with officers, working together, but pausing, drawing a line under what went before, and then taking that and looking and saying, okay, what are the themes that we really want to tackle first over the next sort of year? Because this will very much roll into the next civic year. Well, we are in the next civic year, sorry, but we've got to look beyond that. So I don't think just going, let's do a little bit more what we did before, or just a little bit less, is the way to be. Sorry, Natasha.
Let me come to Natasha, please. Natasha.
Hi, sorry. I just to pick up on that, really. I don't think having a stripped back scrutiny, as suggested by the Centre for Public Scrutiny in this time of unprecedented craziness that we're all living through, having a stripped back scrutiny where we can ask more questions of cabinet members because there are fewer reports, we could still roll that into this structure, and actually might suit this structure better because we're having fewer reports and there's less kind of stuff to read through. So I don't see why that's a thing we can't do. But also we're being recommended to review this at every meeting. So if suddenly the situation changes and actually we don't get the second peak and things do go back to normal, what's to say then we can't open up the panels at that point? I just feel we are just in a weird place right now. We haven't got the testing strategy in place yet, and we don't know what the implications of that's going to be locally, and we don't know what the implications of that's going to be on a second peak. So I think we just need to not create excess work before we know exactly what's going to happen. So let's keep reviewing every single meeting. Let's have this exact conversation every single time and see if that's the time to open it up again.
Okay, yes, let me, if I can just comment. I mean, Jed has outlined to us what officers might be able to provide by way of briefing, Q&A, possibly cabinet members involved in that, but not the long reports. And your response thus far suggests to me that actually would be quite popular, that you would like that opportunity to have more discussion and questioning and less time working through those on average 295-page reports. So let's at least stay with that thought as to how we operate in a different style, because that seems to be attractive to us. And Natasha's point that really it is so uncertain now that we should not be making commitments more than a month at a time. Who knows whether by June, by July, we could be looking at a very different set of circumstances. Let me bring in Ed. Ed, you wanted to comment?
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. No, absolutely, just echoing the words of Councillor McLean. Certainly, you know, businesses, people, schools, everyone across the whole borough, they're all having their meetings using the technology. This is the new normal now. People are able to do that without 300-page reports, just getting together, using the technology with a basic agenda and speaking, you know, having the opportunity to ask the cabinet members, who I'm sure are going to be really pleased to let everyone know what they're up to and take a few questions. These are such important issues. We've got the overview, we've got the Sustainable Communities panel, and that needs to come back as soon as possible. We've got issues like, you know, Garth Road, the closure of the common, cycling, all these social distancing, very, very important things for the crisis. That panel needs to come back as soon as possible, as does CYP, being children and young persons. We've got the schools reopening, so we need a proper panel where we can just discuss it, where the relevant elected councillors and we shouldn't be in this position where we're scared of bringing them back. We can meet using the technology. We can meet virtually, and there's even a statement in the council's own report that says at a moment's notice they're going to bring back the Healthier Communities older person scrutiny panel at a moment's notice. So when you've got a statement like this expressing a willingness to bring a scrutiny panel at a moment's notice, there is no excuse for our council to say, oh, well, let's put these scrutiny panels on hold. We need them all back so the residents can have their say across the borough on these crucial matters as soon as possible.
Councillor McCabe. Peter, would you?
Yeah. Just like to respond to that. The reason that we've, can you hear me?
We can hear you, yeah, I can hear you.
The reason that we've felt it was important and necessary is because of the very important issue of St Helier Hospital, and to have the opportunity to respond to decisions made. And you know, what we've been talking about earlier on involves the highlighting of health inequalities. And if we are going to be silenced on that issue, when there is a proposal to move the A&E department away from the most deprived areas around St Helier Hospital to Belmont, which is as close to Surrey as you could get, then you know I don't think we'd be doing our job. But having said that, I think there are situations that we're facing at the moment where there is a crisis. We're dealing with a crisis, and we should allow officers and indeed cabinet members the time and space to deal with that crisis. And you know, however much we might desire to sound off, we need to recognise that they have a responsibility to address the problems of Merton and to get on and find solutions. And I would rather they spent time doing that than listen to people pontificating about issues that can wait.
Natasha, let me come to you. You wanted to contribute?
Sorry, just to pick up on a couple of points Ed mentioned. So if there are, so as from my understanding from this report, we are to also come up with the work programme for this, right? So if there are things that we think are critical to what is happening in our borough, whether that be public spaces or whether that be cycling infrastructure, if we deem that to be something that's the most important thing to talk about, isn't that the point that we have those spaces in those meetings to do that, so we don't necessarily need to bring back the entire panel to do that?
That really gives me an opportunity to mention something that certainly is critical, and that is the climate action plan, which is due to go to Cabinet in July. And I do think that is going to affect all of our policies, all of our lives for some years to come. We should be certainly taking opportunity to undertake pre-decision scrutiny on that. And I wonder whether that is the subject we should be taking for our next meeting. Let me take Councillor Keller on that, and then I'll come back to you, Natasha. Cool.
I just want to come back mainly on Peter's point. Scrutiny isn't a talking shop. It's not a place to sound off. It's where we can actually explore what the council is trying to achieve and improve that process. It's not sounding off. Now, I would have thought, for instance, transport strategy doesn't get to mention those criteria, and yet that's a crucial opportunity in this awful period in our time. Now, what would be wrong for sustainable communities talking to cabinet members about the strategy going forward? We've put this together, we've got something down, now we want to move forward. Surely you could quiz the cabinet member about this and move it forward.
Let me try and move this forward. I think the really the essence of this is whether we try to, or whether we put these issues through the panels, or whether we continue to focus through the commission to really not overload the resources. Now that's not just resources of the officers who need to respond, it's also the resources of our democratic services team. Do bear in mind that each of these meetings requires 2 support staff, not 1. So one to take notes of the meeting and the other to drive the technology. So we must, however we do it, we must ration ourselves. We will certainly not be able to do the volume of meetings that we had in the timetable before all of this cropped up. Joan, you were indicating you wanted to say. Councillor Henry. Joan, we're not hearing you.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now, yeah.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I think all scrutiny meetings are important. However, at this very challenging time, we have to look at the ones which are more challenging to us and the ones that we as councillors can address without having the cabinet members involved. Because as we all realize, the cabinet members have a very delicate, important role at this moment. However, I think, and as I said before, all scrutiny meetings are very important.
Joan, thank you for that. Can I just comment on cabinet members? Actually, it's cabinet members attend by invitation, not by right. If we make that invitation sound a little bit like the 8:10 slot on today, they may be reluctant to attend. But Natasha, what can, let me come to you.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong necessarily inviting them to these restricted strict back meetings. I think that's fine if we're replacing that. We're replacing long reports with those kind of Q&As. And when we're talking about the work, again, just go back to the work program, again, it's us who decides what we think is vital to these meetings. And it's us who decide what is strategically important. So, and again, we get to review that as we go along. So if we can then suddenly, if things are fine and we can suddenly open up all the panels again, then absolutely let's do that. But until that time, should we not be making life easy for the officer, because really it's about the officers' time and work and the council's resources. Should we not make making their lives as easy as possible? And then just on the thing about what we should talk about first, I'm wondering, should it be schools, given that the open date, apparently, you know, the projected and hopeful open date is the 1st, and if our next meeting is the 23rd of June, there may be schools who haven't reached that or have, and we might need to really look at what's happening there, and especially with the vulnerable children that aren't now showing up at MASH because they're not showing up at school and they can't be referred on. So there might be something there that we should look at first.
Yes, I would agree with that. If we can keep the questions precise and resist the urge to labour the point at length, then there's no reason why we shouldn't cover more than one topic in a meeting. Although I do feel there's value in having a principal focus. Councillor Kohler. Paul?
Thanks. Natasha's highlighted the point. There are various issues happening in parallel. Schools is an issue. Clearly, social care, what's happening now, what's happening in care homes is an issue. What's happening in the local economy. If we do it all, it gets ridiculous. A number of things in parallel can be happening. And I'm not asking for lots of officers' time. I'm simply looking at those scrutiny panels, entering a dialogue with a cabinet member. And to Joan, to your point, we're talking about just an hour of the cabinet member's time, if that. We're not talking about vast amounts of preparation. We just want to talk to the cabinet member about the political leadership addressing these various issues so that we can form a consensus on many of them, because many of them shouldn't be party political.
Councillor McLean. Nick? Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I would like to echo Councillor Kohler's point, and going back to Councillor McCabe's point, everything's a priority at the moment. I know that you've highlighted Centralia, but we have to look at everything. Councillor Kohler is right. We can't overload this committee as much as we cannot overload the officers. And that is why I think we should be bringing back all the panels. And I think it's a little disappointing because I think I'm getting the feeling there's a bit of protection going on of the cabinet members. You know, they are elected, they've accepted their roles in the cabinet, and they should be invited to this meeting, and they should be questioned on their approach and what is happening. And I think it's disappointing to see the protection going on from certain panel members tonight.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Pritchard, you want to come back?
I just think it's probably too clear. My suggestion when I opened it up, I really was nothing was motivated by the welfare of cabinet members. It was more about the operational capacity of the Secretariat who's going to provide work and what they're going to be doing over the next couple of months. I don't disagree with the sentiment behind all the examples that Councillor Gregan and Councillor Kohler, Councillor McLean have used about things that people want to look at and reasons why. Not at all. All I'm saying is that extraordinary times probably just requires to balance those competing needs a little bit more, the needs that we don't see, the needs of the workforces versus the needs of what you want and what we want to talk about, while simultaneously us using then that time when we are as a scrutiny community less busy with direct interchange with scrutiny officers to think about the shape of scrutiny going forward, given the changes to it. You know, I know what you're saying, Ed, about, you know, you want to bring, yeah, cool, but the answer for looking at those issues might not be through a CYP panel. It might, we decide in 2 months' time that we have a, I don't know, a recovery panel, an operational response panel to look at both those different things so one can focus going forward. All I'm suggesting is that over the next month or two, we pare it back so as that this pause, this kind of transition between response and recovery can be facilitated in the council, and then we use that slight less drain on our time to think about what shape scrutiny looks from this summer onward to bear with the continuing presence of the coronavirus response and the wider recovery now in as part of that, and how we want it to look, because this committee really is, you know, looking around the most senior scrutineers, the chairs, etc. So really, is there a new way to slice this cake to think about things, given the changes to everything that have occurred now? So just to emphasise, 100% don't care about cabinet members.
Natasha, last one, and then I think we'll see where
I would like to echo that. I was not defending cabinet members. I was advocating for them definitely coming into scrutiny and having conversations with people. I just want to put that on record. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And Ed?
Should we have a show of hands? Should we call for a show of hands? Who would like to call for the all the scrutiny panels to come back as soon as possible, but with lighter agendas, maybe without the longer reports, and the possibility to invite the cabinet member to answer a few questions? And we've got great processes in place already within the council for you know, for leaders, for the senior officers, the directors, for the cabinet members to put a few things into the agenda and sort them out with democratic services in advance. Very quick and easy process. So I'd like to call for a show of hands on calling for these very important committees on reopening schools, public health.
Can we, before we go to that, in fact,
sustainable communities, all this sort of thing.
Just a moment before I've just got it before Ed does his screen grab, right? I just need clarity in the motion that he's going to use. Is that, are we talking about the task and finish groups as well, or what? Because there's a lot going on here. There's obviously, in scrutiny terms, there's this panel, there's a couple of others, then there's task and finish groups. You know, what that motion doesn't quite give the detail to what we need. So if you're going to put something forward for a vote, let's have detail, let's have accuracy, that let's debate that proposition. Yeah. Let's not just do it for a screen grab on Facebook. Mate.
Yeah, no, I'd suggest drawing the line in a sensible place so we don't have the task groups back immediately, because that would be subject to review, because that would just lessen the burden on the officer. So maybe we would draw the line there and just say the main panels meet, but the task groups, they can be reviewed, you know, the need for those, and separate arrangements could be very sensibly and quickly reviewed within each of the main panels. It's not a decision for us to take, but they should be on hold and less brought back. That would be my, by each panel, that would be my proposal.
Councillor Kenny. Sally, can you? Sally, we're not hearing you at the moment. Can we help Sally into this? Sally, I'm sorry, this is not, you are not audible, so.
No, I'm sorry.
Now you are. Now you
I don't know. I am muted. No, my concern is there are very important. Yes, there's the COVID situation, there's the communities. And I think the council is so busy at the moment with so much, we need to consult with them as to the best way. We need a wider picture of everything they're doing. And the most important things is the prioritising of it. I was able to have what is the priority, along with what we think is the priority that we've got to do, rather than just start meetings up.
Sally, we lost my, I kind of got the gist there, but to move this forward, I'm just wondering if we can't contemplate one baby step to the next meeting, really, and review again at that point in a month's time. I personally feel it's premature to say let's go right back to the full panoply of the panels, even bearing in mind that we can't support them on the same scale before we've digested the impact and the consequences of this meeting. Let me take Natasha.
I'm sorry to come up again. Just to get in to say that this isn't something this council has just cooked up by itself and decided to cancel meetings. It's recommended by the Centre for Public Scrutiny. That is that things are in a very difficult position. And as to Peter's point, if we review it every single meeting and have this debate every single time to make sure that we're not just carrying on, then that's good. And to Ed's point again about where you draw the line, this is us trying to draw the line, because you have to draw the line somewhere, right? You have to draw the line somewhere. And if the line starts here, then maybe by the time we get to the next meeting, we could widen it out. Maybe at the next meeting, we could widen it out further. But just going from this to all panels in one fell swoop it's a lot to ask from people who are dealing with an extraordinary thing right now.
I'm conscious that the recommendation is not to prolong meetings like this. I think we could resolve this simply by asking whether we have agreement to move just 1 month hence onto the next meeting of the Commission. I do feel we should be looking at the climate action plan at that meeting, but we can take other topics as well. I want just a simple show of hands to support just going that one step to the next meeting, please. And now we have a problem counting.
Yeah, can you keep your hands up, please? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I can't count the co-opted member because you're only allowed to vote on education matters. So we've got 6 in favour.
I think John is frozen.
Yes, I've been worried about John for a while. I think he's not actually dead, but
I've been trying to get a question, but it's almost impossible. So I've given up. I'll get a question through.
Julia, do you have oral communication?
Julia?
No.
No.
Okay.
No. I don't have a magic way through. Sorry. I can only hear what everyone else can hear. So that was 6 in favour.
6 in favour of going forward to the next meeting.
Sorry, Peter, I can hear John. He's trying to say something.
Well,
I've been trying to say something for the last half an hour. Sorry.
No. Okay. Julia, can I just check that that would suggest a majority in favour of?
Well, that's 6 in favour. If people who are not in favour put their hands up, I think that's less than 6, but perhaps for completeness, please. No.
So can I, okay, just to make sure of this, those who are not in favour have chosen not to vote on this particular proposal.
Oh, not in favour means what? It means what? We don't have any meetings? Clearly, you know, what we were asking for was a vote to bring back in a rarefied and condensed form the 3 other scrutiny panels. That's the vote we want.
I think, quite honestly, we can look at that in a month's time, and I think we'd need to plan how we could have.
Can we put, Chair, in the spirit of sort of compromise, can we put forward then a motion that in the next meeting in a month's time there will be a well-considered next phase for the bringing back scrutiny at the normal level, which will include all the panels. It'll be done as a model there, and we'll be given a proper course of action as to what we can vote on that next scrutiny for the next level.
Well, yeah, I'd agree with that, Owen, provided the picture is clearer then. I don't think we can necessarily know what the roadmap forward is. Let me bring Julia in.
Sorry, I was just going to suggest that between now and the next meeting that we could do part of what was been suggested as the alternative, which is to have a working group with representatives from each of the 4 groups for each of the panels to look at what the work programme would be for those panels, so that we could bring, in fact, to the next meeting a review setting out, if we're going to go ahead with the panels, these would be the priority areas. This is what we can work on, and I'd really like to involve the directors in that discussion. So if that is a helpful way forward.
That was a far better version of what I was proposing, so thank you for being better.
Thank you.
I mean, my only caveat to that, if I may say, is whether the directors are going to have the time in the next month to help us with that. But subject to that, then yes, that would be a useful bit of work to be doing in the interim between this meeting and the next. So I think we can all sign up to that.
And on a matter of process, can I just clarify that we've recorded John's vote, because we recorded John as present, and I don't know whether or not his vote was recorded or his opinion on this has been recorded in any way.
Julie, can you help us there? Was it John's vote?
It's in terms of the numbers, it doesn't make any difference whether it was 6 or 7. It's still a majority.
Okay.
But I will check with him afterwards as to the vote.
In which case, Chair, may I propose that and this is really dull and technical, sorry, that we rehearse prior to the next meeting how to vote via the chat or an alternate means, because what we don't want to continue with, because you never know, we might end up having a close vote, is a way where people's comms links when people's comms links on Jeopardy. And arguably, if I'm honest, it kind of shows why we're probably not ready for a committee rollout, right? We just need to tie this up. We just need to look at what's best practice from the remote working hub on the LGA, which I'll advertise, and take it there.
Yes, agreed there. We have had some technical glitches, and at various times we've lost various people. I hope we can help them iron out their own personal IT before we meet again. I'm going to conclude the meeting now. We've been going a couple of hours, which I think is plenty. I'd particularly like to thank Jed for giving up his evening to join us and advise us. Jed, you go with our apologies to Sarah for ruining her birthday. So,
thank you, Chair.
Thank you all very much. Julia, I think we're through.
Okay. All right. Thank you. See you all next time, and then I'll be in touch about the working groups.
Thank you, everybody.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thanks.